The sky was thick with smoke, the scent of burning metal and crushed earth hanging heavy in the air. Seraphina Aldrich stood at the edge of the shattered city, the distant hum of alien engines vibrating through the ground. Her hand, gripping the edge of her visor, wiped the rain from her face as she surveyed the battlefield. Below her, the remnants of humanity's resistance were scattered, surviving on the bones of what was once a thriving metropolis. The Gorrath were here, and they weren't leaving until every last trace of human life was wiped from the planet. They'd already destroyed Earth's major cities, their alien fleet making a mockery of humanity's meager defenses. But this place, was different. This was where they made their stand. Seraphina knew the moment she'd set foot on this battlefield, there was no turning back. "Status?" she barked into her communicator. The voice on the other end was strained, filled with tension and fear, yet still resolute. "Captain Aldrich, we're holding the line at Sector 12, but barely. Enemy numbers are overwhelming. We need reinforcements." The transmission cut off abruptly, the static taking over. Seraphina's jaw tightened. She had no reinforcements. It was just her team and the few hundred soldiers left in the resistance. But even if they held the line, what was the point? Every battle felt like a losing one. The Gorrath were relentless, their weapons far beyond anything humanity had ever developed. And Seraphina, the leader of this last fight, was simply another pawn in a game she had no chance of winning. But there was no other option. Her boots crunched against the rubble as she moved toward the command center, an underground bunker hidden beneath the remnants of the city. Each step felt like it was sinking deeper into the weight of their doomed fate. As she approached, she could hear the faint chatter of her soldiers. Most of them were too young to even remember Earth's old glory days, the cities, the technology, the hope. Now, all they had was this moment, and each other. The heavy steel door of the command center creaked open, revealing her squad, familiar faces, worn by time and battle. Jonas, a seasoned sniper who had seen too many friends die. Laris, the grizzled tech specialist who never stopped tinkering. And Drayden, the stubborn and ruthless second-in-command. They all looked at her with a mixture of respect and worry. "Seraphina," Drayden said, his voice grim. "We've got a problem." She raised an eyebrow. "Another one?" "Yeah, it's bad. Our intel was compromised. There's a mole in the resistance." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. A mole. The thought of betrayal was a wound she could hardly bear, especially now, when survival was the only thing that mattered. "We don't have time for this," Seraphina snapped, pacing across the room. "If we don't take out that fleet in the next 24 hours, there won't be a resistance left. We can't afford to hunt shadows." "What's the real issue?" Laris tapped a holographic map of the city. "They've broken through Sector 9. That's the main power grid. If they control it, they'll have complete access to our communications, our defenses, everything." Jonas stepped forward, his usual quiet demeanor tinged with frustration. "It's a trap, Seraphina. They're setting us up. We go in, and we'll be wiped out before we even get close." Seraphina looked down at the map, the red dots on the screen highlighting enemy movements. "So, what's the alternative? We sit here and wait for them to finish us off? We don't have to fight them on their terms," Drayden said, eyes glinting with a new, dangerous idea. "We set a trap of our own. Draw them in." Seraphina hesitated. Drayden had always been more impulsive, more willing to take risks than anyone else on her team. But sometimes those risks paid off. "What's the plan?" Drayden's lips twisted into a smile that bordered on dangerous. "We fake a retreat. Make it look like we're abandoning the base. Then, when they move in for the kill, we hit them with everything we have," Seraphina finished. "No mercy. No hesitation." Laris nodded. "We'll need full control of the grid to get our weapons back online. Once we trigger the defenses, it's all or nothing." Seraphina took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her. The Gorrath were ruthless. They didn't play fair, and they didn't hesitate to destroy anyone who got in their way. But humanity wasn't like that. It never had been. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for revenge. The last stand for a species that had lost everything, yet still refused to go quietly into the night. "Let's move," Seraphina said, her voice cold, commanding. No turning back. As the team prepared for the assault, Seraphina's thoughts turned to the people they had lost along the way. The fallen soldiers, the broken cities, the families left behind. Her mind flashed to her own parents, who had died in the early days of the war. She had promised them she would make sure humanity's fight wasn't in vain. She wasn't ready to let that promise go. Jonas adjusted his sniper rifle, his expression hardening as he looked at Seraphina. "You sure about this? This could be it." Seraphina met his gaze, eyes steely with resolve. "If it's my last mission, then I'm going out fighting. We all are." With that, the squad moved out, slipping through the wreckage of the city, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the enemy. The air was thick with tension as the distant rumble of alien ships filled the sky. They had no idea what was waiting for them, but one thing was certain: this was humanity's last stand, and Seraphina was determined to make it count. As they approached the grid control center, the silence was deafening. The weight of the coming battle pressed down on them all. And just as they reached the door, a transmission came through Seraphina's comm unit. "We've been compromised," the voice said, distorted and panicked. "They know we're here. It's a trap." Seraphina's blood ran cold as the realization hit her. The mole hadn't just sabotaged their plans. They had led the Gorrath right to them. "Get ready," she said, her voice a whisper in the chaos. "We're not done yet." The lights in the control room flickered as Seraphina Aldrich scanned the holographic map in front of her. The once bustling city was now a war zone, its broken streets a stark reminder of the battle they were losing. The Gorrath fleet was just a few miles away. Their ships hovered like vultures, waiting to descend on the last remnants of humanity. But there was no time to mourn, no time to hesitate. "Jonas, can you get a clear shot from here?" Seraphina asked, her voice sharp and steady. Jonas, her sniper, was crouched in the corner, his rifle resting against his shoulder, scanning the horizon through his scope. His face, weathered and grim, gave nothing away. He lowered the scope and met her gaze, shaking his head. "Not unless they get closer. But at the rate they're advancing, it's a matter of minutes before they hit us," he replied, his voice calm, but the edge of anxiety was still there. Seraphina's gaze flickered to the screen. The Gorrath were closing in, their movements like clockwork, precise and relentless. "Then we make our move now," she said, the resolve in her voice leaving no room for doubt. The rest of the team had gathered around the table, their faces lit by the blue glow of the map. Laris was hunched over the console, fingers flying across the keys, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was the tech specialist, the brains behind their operations, and if anyone could find a way to turn the tables, it was him. "We don't have much time," Laris said, tapping a few more buttons. "I've rerouted the power from the lower sectors, but the grid's still unstable. If we don't stabilize the power feed, the whole system could go down." "Then stabilize it," Seraphina snapped, her patience thinning. "Do whatever it takes." Laris didn't respond, his focus absolute. The only sound in the room was the low hum of the machinery and the frantic tapping of keys. Seraphina turned back to Jonas. "We have one chance at this, and it's now or never." Jonas gave a sharp nod, the weight of her words settling over him. "Understood. I'll cover you." She looked at Drayden, who stood by the door, his expression unreadable. Drayden was always the one to take risks, the one who would go to any length to win. But he wasn't impulsive, not anymore. He was a survivor. "You're with me," Seraphina ordered. "The rest of you, prepare the base for extraction. If things go south, we pull out." Without another word, Seraphina grabbed her gear, and the team moved swiftly toward the exit. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete, and the dim lights above cast long shadows across their path. Outside, the storm had intensified, rain pelting the ground, mixing with the distant sounds of explosions and distant gunfire. As they reached the outer perimeter of the outpost, Seraphina's heart raced. She knew that the Gorrath would be expecting a counterattack. They had studied humanity's tactics, their weaknesses. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for humanity's pride. And Seraphina would be damned if she let them fall without a fight. Jonas set up his position on the rooftop of a crumbling building, the weight of his rifle a familiar comfort. His eyes narrowed as he tracked the movement of the Gorrath forces. He was a machine in combat, his focus unshakable. But even he could feel the pressure mounting. This was their last shot. Drayden, ever the tactician, took his place next to Seraphina, his face a mixture of determination and anticipation. "You're sure about this? We're walking straight into the lion's den." Seraphina looked at him, her expression unwavering. "We don't have a choice. They'll never see us coming." The rest of the team spread out, taking positions behind cover. The storm raged on, the rain coming down harder, the distant rumble of thunder masking their footsteps. Seraphina felt the familiar weight of her pistol in her hand, her fingers twitching with the anticipation of the fight to come. "Laris, how long?" Seraphina barked into her comms. 30 seconds. "Power stabilizing," Laris replied, his voice tight. "Just make sure you're in position when the grid comes online. If not, it's over." Seraphina nodded, eyes scanning the battlefield. The Gorrath forces were methodical, their troops moving like a well-oiled machine, but there was a flaw in their strategy. They underestimated humanity's ability to adapt. "Ready," Drayden muttered, his voice low. He was always ready, always eager to dive into battle. "Let's do this." The final countdown began. Seraphina's pulse quickened as she gave the signal. Jonas fired the first shot, a deadly accurate strike that took down the lead Gorrath soldier. The enemy was quick to respond, but it was already too late. The base's power grid surged to life with a thunderous roar, lighting up the battlefield and sending a wave of energy through the city. The Gorrath forces were momentarily blinded by the sudden surge, and that was all the time Seraphina needed. She leaped into action, signaling her team to advance. Drayden was the first to move, charging toward the Gorrath lines with a ferocity that only someone with nothing left to lose could muster. His combat knife glinted in the rain, and his footsteps were like thunder as he closed the distance between him and the alien forces. Seraphina followed, her every move calculated, precise. She ducked behind cover, firing her weapon in quick bursts, taking down Gorrath soldiers one by one. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but her mind was clear. She wasn't thinking about survival. She was thinking about the next move, the next target. Each shot was a decision, each move a step closer to victory. "Seraphina, they're pushing back!" Laris's voice crackled over the comms. "I know. Keep the grid online," she shouted back. "We need more time." The battle raged on, the deafening sound of gunfire and explosions filling the air. Seraphina's focus was unwavering. She could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but she would not let humanity fall without a fight. As the Gorrath regrouped, Seraphina knew the final moment was near. They were no longer just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win, to prove to the galaxy that humanity would never be wiped out. Then, the ground shook beneath them. Seraphina's blood ran cold as she looked up. In the distance, the massive silhouette of the Gorrath dreadnought-class warship descended from the sky. It had arrived. The real battle was about to begin. The night sky, once dotted with the fiery streaks of distant explosions, now glowed a haunting red from the descent of the Gorrath dreadnought. Its massive form blocked out the stars, casting a shadow over the broken city like an omen. The ship's engines roared, sending tremors through the ground, and Seraphina Aldrich felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't just another battle, it was the war's turning point, and humanity's last hope was crumbling with every passing second. "Jonas' status?" Seraphina asked through the comms, her voice tight with urgency. The sniper had a vantage point high above, his position in a nearby tower critical to the mission's success. "Clear shot, but we've got incoming," Jonas responded, his tone calm despite the chaos. "I've got at least a dozen moving toward your position. They're trying to flank you." Seraphina's eyes narrowed. We don't have time for a standoff. We fight or we die. She could already hear Drayden rallying the troops. His wild energy had always been contagious. No hesitation, no mercy. The moment the dreadnought's gravity field touched down, the ground was lit up with alien fire. Plasma blasts surged through the air like a storm, obliterating chunks of buildings and throwing dust and debris into the air. Seraphina raised her rifle, her heartbeat matching the rhythm of her movements. The Gorrath were coming. Their soldiers, towering figures in their black and crimson armor, advanced with military precision. Their energy shields shimmered with an ethereal blue glow, while their weapons crackled with deadly force. Yet Seraphina felt no fear. She had been fighting for too long, too hard to back down now. The first enemy came into view, a Gorrath soldier, moving cautiously. Seraphina didn't hesitate. Her shot rang out, clean and efficient. The soldier dropped to the ground, a burst of smoke rising from the crater where it fell. But there were more. Always more. Cover fire, now! Seraphina shouted as she darted behind a collapsed wall, bullets ricocheting off the rubble around her. She couldn't waste a moment. She had no intention of letting the Gorrath claim victory on her watch. Lara's voice crackled through her comms. I've patched into their comms, but the signal's a mess. I'm trying to disrupt their communications. You need to hold them off long enough for me to cut through their encryption. I'll hold them off. Seraphina growled, her voice steely with resolve. Do your job, Laris. And make it fast. Jonas' rifle fired again, the sound sharp and precise. He had already taken down 2 more Gorrath soldiers. But even from his vantage point, the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. The Gorrath were pushing forward with a brutal efficiency, their advance relentless. We can't keep this up, Jonas warned, voice laced with concern. They'll overrun us. I'm not asking for a miracle, Jonas, Seraphina snapped, her grip tightening on her weapon. I'm asking for a fight. The sound of heavy footsteps approaching cut through the air, and Seraphina's gaze flicked to the horizon. She could see them now, Gorrath shock troopers, their massive forms nearly impervious to fire, advancing with heavy cannons aimed directly at the heart of her team. We need an exit strategy, now! Lara's voice was barely audible beneath the crackle of the chaos around them. Not yet, Seraphina answered, a grim determination in her voice. We need to hit them harder. And hit them she did. Seraphina dashed from cover, firing as she went. Her soldiers followed, moving with synchronized precision. They advanced in a tight formation, relentless as a tidal wave. Seraphina's heart raced as she ducked into a building, her fingers flying over the control panel of a nearby terminal. The building hummed with power. There was still some fight left in humanity's infrastructure. If she could access the main grid, she might just be able to tip the scales. Laris, I need a power boost. Now! She yelled into her comms, the intensity of the battle radiating in her words. I'm on it, Laris responded. I've got one chance to reroute the power to the central defense grid. Just keep those Gorrath busy. Seraphina didn't answer. She was already out the door, charging into the heart of the fray, her pulse racing. The Gorrath were relentless, but they were predictable. As Seraphina ducked behind a crumbling structure, she saw Drayden charging forward, his blade flashing as he tore through their ranks. He wasn't just fighting for survival, he was fighting for vengeance. The sheer rage in his movements was almost palpable, and Seraphina could see the fire in his eyes as he cut through the enemy lines. Get to the grid! Drayden shouted, his voice hoarse with exertion. This isn't just a fight for our lives, it's for everything we've lost. Seraphina didn't need to hear more. She surged forward, her weapon raised. The ground beneath her feet trembled as the Gorrath unleashed a barrage of firepower. She leapt into a dive, rolling behind a fallen piece of debris, her rifle barking out more shots, each one finding its mark with brutal efficiency. Then, as the sky flashed with energy blasts, the world seemed to slow. Seraphina's eyes locked onto a new target. A towering figure, cloaked in dark armor, emerged from the smoke. Lord Vargoth. The alien warlord himself had arrived, Seraphina's breath caught in her throat as she saw the size of him. His armor alone was a monolithic work of technology and intimidation. He moved with purpose, his cold, calculating eyes scanning the battlefield. The Gorrath soldiers parted to let him through, and he locked his gaze onto Seraphina. "You're a stubborn one, human!" Vargatha's voice rang out, a low, guttural growl that seemed to shake the air itself. "But you cannot win! This world will burn!" Seraphina's pulse hammered in her ears, but she refused to show weakness. She stood tall, her stance unwavering. "If you want this world, you'll have to kill every last one of us to take it." Vargatha's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We will. You're just the first. The rest of your species will follow." Seraphina's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't flinch. "If we're going to die today, then you're going to remember our names. Every last one of them." With that, the battle resumed. Seraphina didn't need words. She knew what had to be done. The war for humanity's future was far from over, but for the first time, Seraphina felt the fire of her people's defiance burning in her heart. Victory, or death. The silence was deafening. The storm had passed, and with it, the battle. Seraphina Aldrich stood in the wreckage of the battlefield, staring out at the smoldering remnants of what was once a proud city. The distant sound of crackling fires was the only noise that remained, a grim reminder of the cost of humanity's survival. The Gorrath were gone, vanquished in a final, explosive clash that left both sides shattered, but the victory came with a price. Seraphina's armor was scorched, her face streaked with blood and dirt. She didn't feel the pain. Not yet. She couldn't afford to. Not with so many lives lost, so much still undone. The air was thick with the scent of burning metal and scorched earth, the sky still an eerie shade of red from the dying embers of the Gorrath dreadnought. The war was over. But for her, it didn't feel like victory. She turned slowly, surveying the scene, her eyes locking onto the survivors. The few who had made it out. Jonas, Laris, Drayden, they were alive, but the weight of the loss was clear in their eyes. The remnants of humanity's resistance were scattered, bruised, and broken, but alive. "Seraphina," Jonas said softly, stepping toward her. His voice was hoarse, tired, and yet there was relief in his eyes. "We did it." Seraphina looked at him, but her expression was unreadable. She didn't know how to respond. Victory had never felt so hollow. "You did what you could," she said finally, her voice low but steady. "But it's not over." Jonas gave her a look. "We're alive. The Gorrath are gone. It's over." "No," she replied, shaking her head. "This is just the beginning." Laris, standing nearby, spoke up. "She's right. The Gorrath might be gone, but we've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more we don't know. So much we haven't uncovered yet." His tone was grim, his hands shaking from exhaustion as he fiddled with his tech device. He had always been the analytical one, the mind behind the mission. But even he seemed uncertain now. Seraphina's gaze shifted to Drayden, who was sitting on a fallen pillar, cleaning his bloodied hands. His expression was more resigned than usual, his mind no doubt racing with the same thought that echoed in Seraphina's own mind. "You think Vargoth was the only one?" Drayden asked, his voice heavy with realization. Seraphina nodded. "No. He was just the beginning. There are more out there, waiting for us to slip up to rebuild. If we don't fight for what's left, we'll lose again. We always will." Her words hung in the air, thick with the weight of their meaning. The fight for survival was never over. She knew that better than anyone. The Gorrath were only one part of a much larger war. The galaxy was a vast, dangerous place, and humanity had just made its mark, but Seraphina knew that their mark would be erased if they didn't keep fighting. She turned toward the remains of the command center, where their war strategy had been drawn and rewritten 100 times. She walked toward the cracked display screen, wiping the soot from it as she prepared for the next battle. "We need to rebuild," Seraphina said, her voice gaining strength. "We need to unite the survivors, gather resources, and start preparing for whatever's next." Vargatha's fleet is gone, but there's always someone else, someone more dangerous. Jonas walked up beside her, his eyes flicking between her and the horizon. You're talking about another war, aren't you? She didn't flinch. Yes. If we don't act now, the future we've fought for will be nothing but ashes. The others exchanged glances, but no one spoke. It wasn't fear that held them back, it was understanding. They all knew the truth in her words. The war might have been won, but peace was never guaranteed. It was a cold reality, one they had all been forced to accept long ago. Drayden rose to his feet, his posture stiff, and placed a hand on Seraphina's shoulder. What do you need from us? He asked, his voice steady but with a hint of exhaustion. Seraphina looked around at her team, her comrades in arms, the ones who had stood by her when the world fell apart. She didn't have all the answers, but she had a single purpose now, a purpose that was far bigger than any one person. We need to lead, she said, her voice unwavering. We need to make sure humanity has a place in the galaxy. Not as victims, not as survivors, but as warriors. We need to show them that we'll fight for this world, for every world we can take back. Laris nodded slowly. I'll start working on the comms, get in touch with the other survivors. There's got to be more out there. Jonas's hand rested on his sniper rifle, his eyes hardening with resolve. And I'll find the next target. There's no point sitting back. Drayden, his ever-present fire reigniting, cracked a rare smile. Then let's make sure we're ready for them. Seraphina turned back to the horizon, the red sky now fading to a dark, starless void. She knew the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but for the first time, she felt something stir within her, a renewed sense of hope. The Gorrath had underestimated them. They had underestimated humanity's will to fight. She wouldn't let this victory be their last. We fight, she said, her voice a low growl. And we fight until there's nothing left but the ashes of our enemies. For Earth. For humanity. As the team moved to their respective tasks, Seraphina stood alone, watching the remnants of the world burn. It was a hollow victory, but it was theirs. And in that moment she realized that even the darkest of nights would end, one day, one victory at a time. The war was far from over, but Seraphina Aldrich would make sure humanity's fire never went out. She would lead them into the unknown, fighting not just for survival, but for a future where they would never again be hunted. It was time to rebuild. And this time, humanity would be ready.